Happy New Year, everyone. Psychologists studying Ted Bundy have always characterized him as a psychopath displaying traits such as superficial charm, manipulativeness, and a profound lack of empathy. Subscribe to my YouTube channel as we continue on our series on forensic psychology. Catch ya.
I'll be reporting on Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was actually born as Theodore Robert Cowell. His name was changed to Theodore Robert Bundy when his mom met and married Johnny Culpeper Bundy in the year 1950. Now, Ted Bundy was born on November 24th, 1946 in Burlington, Vermont. He was born to Eleanor Lewis Cowell, who was an unmarried woman and did not know the father of Ted Bundy. This led to him being kept a secret and living in an environment of stigma. In his early childhood, Ted Bundy was raised to believe that his grandparents were his biological parents and his mother was actually his elder sister. In his early childhood, according to accounts, Ted Bundy said that his grandfather, Samuel Chris, was very abusive and was emotionally violent to people living around him and even to his children. He said that his grandmother was a timid, quiet woman who rarely left the house and was scared of being outside and undergo treatment for depression. In his early childhood, around 3 years old, Ted Bundy was actually a very quiet child and he was very intelligent and he was very perceptive. However, they noticed some kind of psychopathic tendencies in his developmental stages. For example, one instance when he was 3 years old, his mother's younger sister woke up to Ted Bundy standing beside her bed, who has surrounded her. That is where she was lying down. He laid several knives around her, a 3-year-old Ted Bundy, and he was smiling very creepily at her when she woke up from a nap in the afternoon. In 1950, Ted Bundy and his mother moved to Washington, Tacoma, to stay with some cousins. Later that year, Eleanor, which is Ted Bundy's mother, met Johnny Culpeper Bundy, who was a cook in a hospital, and they got married that year. Despite the fact that Johnny, being his stepfather, tried to maintain a relationship with his stepson, Ted Bundy was very resistant to that relationship. Even when they went on family trips, he was always very isolated and did not want to associate with his other younger siblings. In later years, Ted Bundy would tell one of his girlfriends that his stepfather was very dull and did not have a lot of money. Ted Bundy graduated in 1965 from high school, and then he went to UPS, which is University of Puget Sound, in 1966. However, he stayed there for only a year before transferring to Washington State University in 1967. In 1967, he was studying Chinese in Washington State University. He met a classmate by the name Diane Edwards, and they started a romantic relationship. However, in 1968, Ted Bundy dropped out of the university and started working several menial jobs. Due to this, Diane was angry and annoyed at Ted Bundy because she felt that he was not ambitious and he was a slacker and he was not serious with his life and did not have future goals. So she broke off the relationship with him. Ted Bundy, being heartbroken, decided to fall back on violent pornographic literature to deal with his heartbreak. However, in 1969, Ted Bundy met another single mother by the name Elizabeth, who had a 3-year-old child, and they started another relationship. In 1970, Ted Bundy decided to be serious with his life, and then he went back to school. He went back to Washington State University and enrolled for a psychology major. He was accepted, and in 1971, he started a part-time job at a suicide hotline, where he worked alongside police officers, receiving calls and trying to help victims of suicide and people that had suicidal ideations. According to one of his co-workers, Rule, who was a police officer, she said that Ted Bundy was one of the most empathetic and kind person that she has ever met. However, in 1972, Ted Bundy graduated from the Washington State University and got a psychology major. In 1973, he was accepted into 2 universities to study law. While he was in university studying psychology, Ted Bundy was an A-star student. He was very intelligent and he was the favorite of all his professors. And they also gave him a kind word when he was going to register for law school. Ted Bundy started law school in 1973. Then in 1974, he met Diane Diane being his first girlfriend. Then he met her and they continued the relationship despite the fact that he was still dating Elizabeth. So he was dating the both of them at the same time. In 1974, they continued the relationship. However, several months later, Ted Bundy suddenly stopped talking to Diane. And she was confused because she felt that since he had started getting his life together, there was a future for both of them. When she called Ted Bundy and asked him later, he was like, Diane was confused and there was no relationship that was going on between them. Later that year, in 1974, towards the end of the year, Ted Bundy stopped going to law school and he started skipping classes. Now, it was in 1974 that Ted Bundy's murder started officially. Despite the fact that Ted Bundy never revealed when exactly he started killing women, it was recorded that it was in 1974 that Ted Bundy started his murders. Now, Ted Bundy, as a child, usually went through trash cans in Tacoma in his childhood neighborhood. He would search for investigative magazines that dealt with gory images of women that were mutilated. He would see them, he would masturbate to them. He would also prowl the community, and whatever window that was open where a woman was changing, he would stand there and keep looking at them and masturbating to that visual image, that visual representation. So that particular thing that he was in, that particular habit, developed this need to see women in that kind of vulnerable situations. Then later in 1974, Ted Bundy's mode of operation was usually he would impersonate a security officer, or he would impersonate like a man that was injured. He would tie slings around his hands, he would bandage his head, and then he would just come up to an unsuspecting female, and then he would ask for help, either to move something into his car, and by the time they followed him to his car to help him, he would use like a crowbar, and then he will hit them several times in their head until they fall unconscious. Then he might move them to a secondary site where he will sexually assault them before mutilating their bodies. Ted Bundy also told investigators that the journey to his to murdering women started from when he was a teenager. He would shoplift, he would pickpocket, and he said that that feeling of pickpocketing and stealing gave him this possession. And he likes the feeling of wanting to go out and get something and being able to get it and keep it. Initially, when Ted Bundy started sexually assaulting women, he said that it was because of the need to possess another person. And he felt that sexually assaulting women would give him that particular satisfaction. Initially, he didn't want to murder them, according to Ted Bundy. According to his statement, he said that the need to murder them began when he needed to hide the evidence, and that was when he started murdering these women. From here, we can see the first known victim of Ted Bundy was Karen Sparks, who was just 18 years old. You can see from here, I don't know if it's clear, the basement apartment where she was staying. Ted Bundy got here, he found a crowbar in her garden. Then from this basement window, he got in. Then she was sleeping, and then he used that crowbar that he got from her garden and hit her several times in the head. Then he also assaulted her with that particular crowbar. He sexually assaulted her with the crowbar several times until her spleen and her bladders were ruptured. So this, however, she survived. She survived. So from 1974, Ted Bundy killed a series of women. And if you notice, most of the time when he was asked how he selected these particular women, he said that beauty and youth were two very important factors. And you can see that most of these girls are very, very pretty. And they are very young. This is 21, and you also have 12 years old, 16 years old, 18 years old, 9 years old. Those were his victims. Now, in 1975, Ted Bundy was actually arrested in Utah in 1975 because a patrol officer saw him going through a neighborhood and his car was just cruising around. He was looking for his next victim. And then when the police officer sighted him and approached him, Ted Bundy tried to run and sped up his car, and the police officer chased him. When the police officer caught up with him and arrested him and searched his vehicle, these were the items that were found in Ted Bundy's car. You have a torch, a flashlight, you have the ski marks, you have handcuffs, you have trash bags, you have coils of rope, and so many more. When asked, Ted Bundy said that the ski marks, he used it for skiing, and the handcuffs, he found it in a trash bag. Because there was no evidence against him, the police officer had to let him go. And that was how Ted Bundy escaped. Now, he moved, because he had already been found out in Utah, he moved to, in 1975, he moved to Colorado and Idaho. And that was when he killed 5 women in Idaho there in 1975. In 1978, Ted Bundy decided that he wanted to keep a low profile. So from 1976, 1977, Ted Bundy decided to keep a normal job and not involved in any criminal lifestyle. However, because he had already been used to this particular sort of lifestyle, he decided that he could not boredom and the need to possess another human being. In 1978, Ted Bundy went to the Florida State University, a Chi Omega sorority, where this kind of sorority is a place just like a hostel where a lot of girls stay there. There were about 40 girls in that particular hostel. He first went to Levy and Bowman's room. He assaulted them, he raped them, he sexually assaulted them and raped them, and they did not survive. He also went to Karen Chandler's room, who he hit with a kind of an iron that he removed from her bed. Then he hit her on her skull. Her skull was fractured, her jaw was fractured, her right arm was fractured, and her fingers were broken. He also moved to Kathy Cleaner's room. So all in all, four of these women were attacked in that particular house. Then Ted Bundy ran away from there, and then he went to another person that stayed off campus from the school, which is Cherry Thomas. And also, he also hit her and raped her, sexually assaulted her, and she was left with equilibrium damage, which affected her dance career, and she could not dance for the rest of her life. That happened in January 15th, 1978. A few days later, Ted Bundy was becoming desperate because the house in which he was staying, he could no longer afford boarding because he was broke and he had no sustainable income. So a couple of days later, February 9th, he saw Kimberly Diane Leach, a 12-year-old girl who was coming back from high school. Her teacher instructed her to go back to class and get her purse that she forgot. However, Kimberly was never seen again. Ted Bundy was said that he kidnapped her. She was last seen moving into a van with a man that was identified as Ted Bundy. He kidnapped her, and when her body was found, it was concluded that her throat has been cut and her genitals had been mutilated with a knife. 12-year-old girls. This happened on February 9th. On February 12th, Ted Bundy decided that he could no longer stay in Florida, and he hijacked a car, he stole a car, and he attempted to run away. However, when he got to a police checkpoint, they stopped him and tried to search him. When the officer checked his car, they saw the wallets of these sorority members in his car and their ID cards. They saw it and then they became suspicious because as of then, the news had already gone all over the state and they were looking for Ted Bundy. When the police officer told him to come down and he was under arrest, Ted Bundy tried to kick the man on the leg so that he would stumble and then he would try to run. However, the man shot at Ted Bundy and they later caught him. When they arrested Ted Bundy in the car, Ted Bundy said that it would have been better if they had killed him instead. So that was when Ted Bundy was arrested. He was arrested in 1978, and Ted Bundy's trial dragged on for a long time because it was actually in 1989 that Ted Bundy was actually sentenced to the electric chair on January 24th. Before he was sentenced to the electric chair, the night before, that was January 23rd, he was given a call, 3 calls to make to anybody that he wanted to. He called his mother, and his last words to his mother was that he's sorry that he has caused her so much pain, that there was always a part of him that was hidden, that he could not express, that they knew nothing about. That is Ted Bundy. Now, when it comes to the pathology of Ted Bundy, during his whole trial process, Ted Bundy went through so many psychiatric assessments because everybody was like intrigued by this kind of individual, and they really wanted to understand what happened to make the monster that was Ted Bundy. And during the several psychiatric process, some psychiatrists or psychologists said that he had bipolar disorder, while some said he has multi-personality disorder. But because the reason for his multi-personality disorder was because Ted Bundy, if you look at this picture, you can see 9 pictures here, and if you look at them closely, Ted Bundy has several images, right? He had distinct features. There was a way he could style his hair and you look like a totally different person. There was a way he would just have mustache and you would look like a totally different person. And that was how he was able to evade capture for a very, very long time. Ted Bundy was also very charismatic. He was very manipulative, and he knew how to fake human emotions as if they were real. However, according to the pathology, it was decided that the real case of Ted Bundy was actually antisocial personality disorder. As of then, that was the conclusion that they came to. Why? That was because they said Ted Bundy met several of these characteristics. One of the characteristics of ASPD is that the person understood human emotions, but they could not feel them themselves. The person felt no remorse, the person felt no guilt. The person understood what was right and what was wrong. However, these things did not affect their actions or their behaviors whatsoever. That's okay. And now this, if you look at this picture carefully, this was his Volkswagen. This was the car that he usually used to kidnap girls and take them to where he would sexually assault them and kill them. If you look at the car, the front seat of this car, the front seat, the passenger seat was actually removed and taken to the back. So whenever he stopped to give somebody a ride, instead of them sitting in the passenger seat, he would tell them to sit at the back so as to make it easier for him to handcuff them and then to sexually assault them. Thank you.